Where's our announcer? Where's the announcer that always says those cool things where he says, how does he do it? From Greater Sandton and beyond, this is the Sandton Times Hour. Am I having to do this now? All right, well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond. Welcome to the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and also available on all leading digital audio platforms. I'm Alexander Leibner, and this is edition 156, week 19 of 2024. Where did he go? He always does it every week. Is he on leave? What's his name? Jeffrey? Or Norman? Can't remember. Anyway, we're going to have to see. We'll find him. Next week, he's going to do that announcement again like he always does in the beginning of the show. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. If you want to get in touch, you can send your questions, comments, or feedback to editor@sandtontimes.co.za or connect on social media @SandtonTimes or visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. And of course, if you're listening live on Mix 93.8 and not at a later stage, you can use the WhatsApp line right now, 084-822-0938. That's 084-822-0938. And it's always good to hear from you. If you tuned in to Mix 93.8. A special welcome to everyone listening for the very first time. Normally quite a professional outfit, this. It's normally not this disorganized right from the beginning, like I said. But at least you know who you're listening to when you're listening to it, especially if you're listening every single week. You know exactly what you're in for. And as you tune in from Johannesburg and Pretoria, across South Africa and everywhere else in the world, online or on air, I'm happy to report that, it's another good week in Sandton land, as far as possible. I'm joined by my teammate Vincenzo behind the mixing desk, making sure that we sound okay. Do you know where he went? He's always quite good at this. He's been doing this for like almost 2 years now. I have to find out. Maybe he took a bit of a sabbatical. Anyway, we'll have it back next week, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm back for a moment. It's been another hectic week of traveling. I've been to Madrid and Dubai to do some work. And I feel like I'm just coming to check if the studio is still standing. Barely, is it? No, all things are good here. And I don't know if it's just me because I've been in different time zones and different weather patterns, but the winter, she is with us. I'm feeling like I'm unpacking all my jerseys out of the cupboard to make sure that I've got something suitable to wear as the temperatures drop once more in Sandton. So let's have a look what's coming up in this hour. It's a very property-filled show this week as we kick things off chatting to a CEO in the real estate space around the prices of properties and obviously the buying and selling of properties ahead of the elections, and to get some thoughts there, so stay tuned. And then a development on Winnie Mandela Drive, just as you come in and out of Sandton Central, is moving into its next phase with some major retail plans. We'll be finding out a little bit more, so listen out for this one. And finally, there's a new city emerging in the Sandton Midrand area. So if you start seeing things being knocked over and built and diggers coming along and making things happen, well, I'm going to be chatting to a CEO spearheading this new groundbreaking development and a new city, somewhere there between Woodmead and, what's another thing called? Waterfall Estate and Sandton. It's a bit of a very big geographic area, but you know what I'm talking about. Right, we're getting the hour going, and as we always do, we play some music to kick things off, to get us in the right spirits, and it's Bikini Bandits, Alex Gray, and House Arrest with Lovely Day. You switched on to the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8.
Show some love.
Subscribe. Share.
Leave a review and rating for the Sandton Times Hour
on your favorite podcast app now.
Africa's premium financial event is back. Join us at the Sandton Convention Centre from 20 to 22nd of May and access the latest innovations and insights from across the globe right here in Sandton. Gain insights from industry experts on navigating the markets through immersive learning and education. Don't miss out on this exclusive opportunity to invest in your future. Register today at events.financemagnates.com and claim your free ticket.
The best of Sandton and beyond.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
This is the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and available on all good digital audio platforms wherever you are in the world. And as we get another week going on the Sandton Times Hour, it's always good to chat to business leaders, especially business leaders in the property space. And property's been one of those very interesting topics. I think it's always been an interesting topic, but it continues to be an interesting topic in 2024. Maybe it's the elections, maybe it's the conversation around property rights, maybe it's just because people want to diversify and invest or not invest and maybe put their money into something else. Well, I think I've got the right person on the line to chat to us right now about things pertaining to property. And it's Harry Nicolaides. He's the CEO of Century 21 South Africa. And Harry, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that. What makes an interesting time in the property space right now?
So, Alex, what's astounding and interesting about the local property market is, as you know, South Africa being amongst the global community, we follow the trends, market trends in the USA religiously. There's a lag time of 4 to 6 months, but as the old adage goes, when the USA sneezes, we all catch a cold. The same thing applies in South Africa, and that's also true for the property industry. So whatever happens in the property industry in the USA, almost certainly we follow the same trend 4 to 6 months later. And what's happened to the USA, they ended off 2023, which was only 3.5 months ago, okay? They finished at a 15% down on property sales with regards to value. And even more astounding than that, the USA closed 2023 at a 2-decade low on volumes. So the last time the amount of properties that were sold in 2023 was 2 decades ago. So that's how bad the property market in the USA was. Obviously all related to higher inflation and higher interest rates. But here's the thing. For us in South Africa and my group with 50 offices and 600 agents around the country, all the way from Hoedspruit to Cape Town, so we can safely say that we're a great sample of what's happening to us locally. We are not experiencing those lows. And in fact, year to date, we're at exactly the same level as last year. So we haven't seen those huge drops that USA has seen with regards to volume and with regards to value. And that's what makes our property industry in South Africa. And what's going to make it more interesting, obviously, is the effect of the national elections in a few months' time.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, this story around the interest rates being a bit of a burden to many industries. I mean, we hear it from the automotive industry. We hear it from so many other industries where they're saying high interest rates are slowing down the economy. At the same time, like you mentioned, we've got the elections coming up. It seems between these two, we're all on a bit of a hold pattern until such time as the interest rates come down or the elections are over.
That's exactly what's happening. That's what we're experiencing. So besides not dropping or showing all-time lows like the USA has, we are in sort of a holding pattern. And that's occurred since the interest rate hiking cycle stopped. Remember, we come from a background where I think it was 11 MPC meetings. We had interest rate hikes. And then they stopped for the last 4 or 5. I can't quite remember. I think the good thing for South Africa, the positive, the something positive that we can take from the local property market is this. We haven't seen the drop in property activity as bad as the USA has. And this is on a background of not having any interest rate cuts. So you can imagine if we can continue on this pattern and then wait for an interest rate cut, which, as you know, all financial experts are predicting that we will see cuts. The frequency and the amount of the quantity or the quantum of cuts we don't know yet. But all experts predict that we will have an interest rate drop towards the end of the year. So you can imagine in a stable environment and then we get an interest rate cut, it will turbocharge, shall I say, the property sales industry, and we will start seeing activity going up, and we will start seeing house values going up. And again, this is on the background of a peaceful election and a predictable election.
So it sounds like the second half of 2024 should be a much better part of the year than the first half, given these factors. And I think that's certainly something to look forward to, as you said, all depending on how the interest rate goes and obviously how the elections go as well. I mean, is there any strategy that people should be looking at this point, or is it really just a matter of hurry up and wait?
You know what? That's a very, very interesting question. And being in the property business for 25 years, I've heard that over and over again. But it's a great question. We need to remember that buying a property is a long-term investment. And any property owner will experience cycles, many, many cycles throughout their lifetime as a property owner and as someone that has a bond. And I suppose this is just like the stock market. You know, the experts tell you that the longer you invested in stocks and shares and equity in the stock exchanges, the more your rewards will be, the higher your return will be. And the same thing applies in the property industry. So the stock market goes in cycles, as you know, and so does the property industry. So we will experience cycles many, many times over in our lifetime. So then the question is, well, when is it a good time to buy a property? Should we wait for the elections? Should we wait for the results of the elections? Should we wait until there's an interest rate drop, etc.? My view, and obviously I don't want to risk being an agent and upselling the market. My view is you will be ready to buy a property when you are personally ready. In other words, if your finances are in order, the timing is right for you personally, you've saved a good, reasonable deposit to put down, and you've done your affordability test, and you can comfortably afford the property you want to buy, then you buy, no matter the cycle, because you will experience cycles for the rest of your life as a property owner.
Well, we're discussing property in South Africa. I'm chatting to Harry Nicolaides. He's the CEO of Century 21 South Africa, one of those brands that you've known and heard of in the property space. We're going to take a quick break and then pick up on this conversation again right after this.
From Greater Sandton to the rest of the world, this is the Sandton Times Hour. Follow the Sandton Times on social media.
Sandton Times.
This is the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and available on all good digital audio platforms. I'm in conversation with Harry Nicolaides. He's the CEO of Century 21 South Africa, talking about the property market in South Africa. High interest rates, looming elections, all of these things have sort of brought about this very sluggish sector. But things are looking up for the second half of 2024, and that's exactly what we're talking about. And Harry, I'm happy to be having this conversation with you because I think a lot of people find themselves in a very similar boat. But what I'd be quite interested to find out from you, are there any particular areas or suburbs in South Africa that have shown particular resilience in terms of staying afloat or even growing in this very sluggish economy?
Absolutely, Alex, and they're all over the country. It's not only Cape Town. You know, here we love to sketch Cape Town and surrounds as being the area to buy. There are pockets of growth wherever you are in the country, and it depends on the type of property you're purchasing and the municipality that governs that territory. But generally speaking, properties in secure estates, whether they are townhouses or simplexes or homes in secure estates, do much better than a freestanding property with respect to growth. in the current situation. So there are pockets, we call them pockets of excellence, and they're all over the country, whether they're in Polokwane or in Durban or in Cape Town. You do get growth, and that is why it is important for any prospective purchaser, anyone wanting to get onto the property ladder, is to talk to a professional. Because a professional, this internet has allowed us to gather so much factual information before purchasing a property, where a consumer can know exactly the property trends, the historical predictions for the future, etc., etc. And I think trained property professionals, consumers should demand that type of information from the property salespeople in order to put them in a situation where they can make an informed decision. So the internet and digitalization has put a lot of power into consumers' hands, where they don't have to sit and listen to an estate agent just rambling along trying to upsell a property. There is brilliant information, statistics and data available to consumers to make these informed decisions. And what that's showing us at the moment is that the properties which are showing the highest growth are those in secure or controlled estates, and that's for obvious reasons. We should understand why in South Africa.
And when you say secure and controlled, I mean, apart from the security factor, I'm assuming factors like solid water supply, backup electricity or solar panels or alternative electricity supply are also now playing a big factor in making a decision to purchase in these very advanced estates.
100%. That's exactly true. There's a levy being collected, and collectively the body corporate or the homeowners association, they decide how to spend the money. And obviously, electricity and water supply is high on the agenda. But you know what, Alex? We can't all buy insecure complexes. So the next step for those who need to buy freehold properties, so those are properties not in secure estates, they're not sectional title or anything like that. Obviously, what's happening now in South Africa is people are looking at the local government, the local town councils and the local municipalities. Are they providing reliable services? Are they investing in infrastructure? So those factors are now coming into play quite seriously in South Africa. And, previously, many decades ago, whether it was good or bad thing, there were many thousands of beautiful places, areas, neighborhoods, suburbs, cities, towns, absolutely spectacular, where people would dream about living. But now the situation has changed. Consumers are watching and monitoring who is in control of the town council, what are they doing with regards to water security, electricity, just general pavement maintenance, beautification of the area, etc. And that's quite a new trend that's appeared in South Africa in the last 4 or 5 years, where consideration is given to local town councils before a decision is made to buy.
Well, it just shows you that the ballot for the local municipality or province is probably almost as important, if not more important, than the national ballot, because even if nationally things don't turn out the way you hope or expect, if your local municipality or town council or province manages to go in the right direction and manages to get a competent team in place, you can make sure you don't have potholes, you don't have water cuts, electricity cuts, etc., make sure that the pavements are kept clean and neat, there's still a good chance that you could still have a very nice corner of South Africa despite sort of the greater macro picture.
Absolutely. What's even more interesting, the actual effect of elections and the election day and the days thereafter, the days leading up to the election. So internationally, many studies were done, and the facts are as follows. All things being equal, In other words, if there's no shock government that gets elected, and if the elections are peaceful and well organized, and a general acceptance of the results, and this is especially this time around because we know where the existing ruling party is faring, but I think the market has factored the chances of coalition government, the existing government losing majority in some areas, etc. The market has factored that in. But interestingly, during election time, it does affect the property market. It does affect property activity sales closer to the elections, but it's not much and it's insignificant. And the latest data I've seen is that property prices fluctuate by only 2 to 3% during a month of elections, whether it's up and down, depending on the mood of the country. And that effect only lasts for 2 to 3 months. So it's a little blip in the time period. It doesn't last long. And obviously, I qualified my statement to say that all things being equal. And it brings us back to the point is, should we wait to see the results of elections? And 99.9% of the time, I think we are going to have a peaceful election. I think it's generally acceptable that there is going to be coalition governments moving forward. I think the market has factored that in, and there should be no real effect on property prices or activity for the actual election. What happens after that, it does depend on what the government does and how it inspires economic activity and what it does to assist to bring interest rates down.
Well, there you have it. Some interesting insights there on the property market and also the state of the country at this point. Harry Nicolaides, CEO of Century 21 South Africa. It's been a pleasure chatting to you, and thank you so much for making the time to join us on the Sandton Times Hour. It's the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a quick musical break and more of the Sandton Times Hour right after this.
Back for more?
The Sandton Times Hour continues.
Welcome to the second half of the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and also available on all good digital audio platforms wherever you are in the world. Make sure you subscribe, follow, and do all those good things to get your weekly dose of all things Sandton and beyond. We're always talking about all kinds of other things in the world as well. So it's not just about Africa's richest square mile and a little bit extra, but there's also so much more beyond the borders of Sandton. I'm Alexander Leipner, and that was Kadabostani featuring Gabriella and Easy. And if you caught something on the show this week, you found it intriguing, you found it interesting, but you didn't get the details, you didn't get the names, don't worry, you can go onto the sandtontimes.co.za. There are show notes for this week's edition, and you can get all those details on there, so you don't have to try and sort of fiddle for a pen or a paper and trying to make desperate notes. No, you can go on there in your own time and get all the information and find it there. And also don't forget, you can follow the Sandton Times on Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok, LinkedIn, wherever you are. There's so many platforms. Make sure you connect there and also get in touch. It's always good to hear from you. Well, coming back to Africa's richest square mile and talking about Sandton, there's some interesting developments happening just down the road, as I like to always say, but everything's sort of just down the road in Sandton. It's Sandton Gate. You might know it if you're on Winnie Mandela Drive on a regular basis. It's on the left as you come into Sandton Central and then head up Sandton Drive. And that's sort of been developing and expanding, and it looks like a really interesting development. I think they've got a Planet Fitness there at the moment. There's a couple of offices. There's also some really nice eateries and coffee shops. But here to chat to me about the next phase of this development is Bryce O'Donnell. He's the Managing Director of Abcon. And Bryce, it's good to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Yeah, Alexander, thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to chat to us.
Well, Bryce, let's chat about this development because, as I say, I think it emerged just before we all went into a global lockdown. Have I got that right? Sort of 2019 was sort of when the first phase of Sandton Gate came to life.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. We launched 15,000 square meters of offices right before the sort of global lockdown and exodus from office space. So it's been, it's been a long time coming, and we're over the moon to be kicking off another phase of offices there. So it's, if we had our way and COVID wasn't in the middle, we'd certainly be a lot further along.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it is a really fantastic spot. I mean, as I say, you also got access to major arteries in and around Sandton. You're now moving into phase 2. What does that mean, or what does that look like?
So we started off phase one with a 15,000 square meter office block, as you mentioned in the beginning, with coffee shops, hairdressers, optometrists, some eateries, 011 by the Baron in there. And phase two is an extension of the retail offering. So we've got 12,000 square meters of convenience retails with your grocers, chemists, really good restaurant offerings, and a further 10,000 square meters of commercial office space, A and B grade commercial office space that we're bringing online.
Well, I always have this conversation with people in the property space, especially the commercial property space, because I always wonder how many more convenience malls, shopping malls, precincts can Sandton handle, because it seems like they're coming up. We've got more Checkers, more dispensaries, more convenience stores are opening up. You clearly obviously see that there's still a massive market for people looking for these kind of services and these kind of facilities.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt that there's a market for it. I mean, we are on the homebound route. As you leave Sandton, you come down Sandton Drive and right onto Winnie Mandela. So you get a lot of that draw card of everyone leaving Sandton on their way home to pick up the bread, milk, dinner for the night. And we're building a precinct. So within our precinct, we've got on completion 350 residential apartments. We've got nearly 70,000 square meters of offices. So within the precinct, we need to provide for that. And for our tenants and customers and residents within that area, they need to be looked after.
I mean, the idea is sort of a live, work, play sort of environment, if I've got that correct. I mean, a place where you can...
100%. As cliched as it is, that's exactly what we're going for, is that, come into a place where you're safe, where we're looking after your electricity with solar and we're looking after your water with backup supply, and you can walk out of your office, you can walk into the grocery store, buy your bread, buy your milk, buy a coffee, go to gym, walk across to your apartment. We're trying to capture your lifestyle in a precinct.
Do you think that that's the secret sauce when it comes to building these kind of developments? Because, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion around how Sandton office space is under pressure, and, we're seeing older office space being converted into hotels and into residential sort of space. Do you think that that sort of recipe that you've got is kind of where things are going and where they need to go to make sure that all those elements are sustainable?
We certainly feel so. So if we take a step back and have a look at what's driving vacancies in the older office space, it's your cost of occupancy is quite high. You've got older light fittings, air cons, lifts, less glazing, less natural light. They become quite expensive places to be. And electricity supply is somewhat insecure at the moment, as we all know. So we're looking for ways to solve that. We're putting energy efficient buildings with proper solar integration on them that provide decent backup power, that we've got batteries, we've got storage of water, we've got our robots connected into our precinct electricity supply, so that we're just providing the services, or at least we're trying to provide the services that you're otherwise missing.
And these are clearly things that you need to keep in mind when you're building for the future, is that you're also having to sort of almost take over some of the municipalities' services and deliverables and integrate that into your structures.
To a large degree, yes. And I think that's also how we're able to induce tenants, is that, your rent may appear on face value cheaper in an older building. When you add up all the sort of unintended consequences and unintended costs that come with it, from downtime in the business, interruptions, staff unhappiness, when you add that all together, it just makes more sense to take your business and your staff for their well-being, happiness, and overall performance into a newer building with amenities and provisions and services and lifestyle elements. It's sort of driving the return to office in many ways.
I mean, you're touching on return to office, and I think this is quite an interesting point. Have you secured any sort of major tenants yet? Have you got any sort of major interest from big corporates to start taking up bigger chunks of office space again?
So we've got two or three that we're in far stages of negotiation with at the moment. But what we're seeing is that the movement in the office space is not strictly driven by the big corporates. It's not your new Sasol headquarters that once was the driver of Sandton, but it's the mid-size and the SMMEs that are looking for office space that you need to have stock available to service. These are the guys that say to you, I need new offices in 6 months to a year, not in 3 to 5 years' time. It's different. It's a different market. It's become quite a lot more nimble and a bit more entrepreneurial in that regard.
And in terms of tenants on the retail space, are there any that you can disclose already? Some that you've already signed up that are ready to rock and roll?
I mean, you could take a guess as to who they are. We've got two big national grocers. We've got a chemist, and we're in the final stages of the negotiations there. We've got two phenomenal restaurants that we've closed out. And a lot of the line shops, we've got a list as long as my arm of guys that we're just going through the sort of prerequisite requirements and just making sure that we can get the tenant mix right. We don't want to duplicate what's in every other centre. We are looking for something bespoke. We're looking for something niche and something that'll service the broader Sandton markets.
An interesting point that you raise, because so often you see shopping centres popping up and it's a bit of a rinse and repeat where you think, well, how many of those stores do we really need in a small space? So clearly finding unique combined with essential is sort of the best space to be in.
There's no doubt. I mean, everyone needs their bread and milk, and there's a few very good grocers within South Africa, and you need your mix of them. There's a few very good chemists. You need them, but you don't need the same clothing stores, and we don't need the same restaurants, and we don't need the same takeaways. You need a differentiator that says, on my way home, I want to stop there because there's a really good Thai restaurant, and we want to go get our food from that place. And so it's the unique selling points. It's the bespoke. It's the niche that will drive feet into the centre.
So a bit of a convenience/destination combination. It seems to be the right thing. Are there any major trends in the property space that are driving some of the decisions around phase 2?
So we are seeing across our portfolio that vacancies in A and P grade office spaces are declining, and we're seeing vacancies declining within broader precincts. And within those precincts where they're properly managed, where they've got proper provision of services being water and electricity, we are seeing tenants leaving the older, under-serviced areas into the better serviced nodes and precincts.
And on the residential side, what are some of the big drivers in terms of getting people to put their money on the table and say, I want to live in Sandton Gate and I want to be part of this?
Look, the residential market, there's no doubt, is under pressure at the moment, and people's pockets in general are under pressure. So the location to their work, to Sandton as the CBD, the business CBD, is what's driving people to want to live there. And what will keep driving the residential sales is the provision of the lifestyle element within the precinct. It's the safety, it's the security, it's I can walk out of my apartment in the morning, walk into gym, buy my bread milk, buy my coffee, walk to my office. It's all of those lifestyle elements that will keep driving the retail sales.
And then, of course, you've got
the residential sales.
And then you've also obviously got this fantastic nature element, which is quite unique, I suppose, to the development as well.
It is, and we're really, really excited to have it, really excited to back onto it. So we've got the Braamfontein Spruit running, which is a Spruit running along the back of the property. We're building a bridge at the moment to link between us and the adjoining neighbourhoods so that you can cross over it, you can walk onto it, into it, and we're also adopting it in some ways and keeping it clean and tidy and protecting it and encompassing it within our precinct to make it better for everyone.
Eco-consciousness seems to be a big part in terms of a lot of these developments. I think it is also a great way of also keeping a lot of costs down whilst making it more energy efficient and doing all the things that we've already touched on. Also plays a big factor at Sandton Gate, I assume.
For sure. And I think, I was saying it to someone the other day, in a global market, the greening of buildings is a bit of it might be a sales technique, it might be driven by other things, but in South Africa, it's driven by necessity. Is that if we don't put solar panels and backup onto our buildings, how do we get people into them? How do we provide services? If I don't put backup water, how do we flush toilets and run restaurants? So it's definitely a green element, and there's no doubt the benefit to the environment and the broader sort of greening of the construction industry. But it's become an absolute necessity in order to provide quality space to our customers.
As things get going, what are we looking at timeline-wise? So what happens when and how many phases do you start going through?
So we've got machinery on site and we're building at the moment. We're looking to complete phase 2 at the end of 2025 and the first quarter of 2026. So we'll launch the retail and the offices. We'll then move on to phase 3 to finish in 2026 and phase 4 along with the remaining resi in 2027. So we've got a few years ahead of us. We are thinking long term here, but we're moving at a rapid rate, we believe.
Well, that sounds very interesting. Sandton Gate is on the move, and it's been great chatting to Bryce O'Donnell. He's the Managing Director of Abcon, sort of spearheading this process. And as you heard, there's still quite a bit of time that still needs to pass before we get to those points. But definitely keep an eye on it. If you drive in and out of Sandton Central on Winnie Mandela Drive, you will know it either on the right or on the left as you're coming in or out of Sandton. And you'll see some movements happening there. And now you're more informed as to what's happening there. So, Bryce, thank you so much for making the time to be on the Sandton Times Hour. We're going to take a quick musical break and more of the Sandton Times Hour right after this.
Connect with the Sandton Times. Email editor@sandtontimes.co.za.
This is the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and also available on all good digital audio platforms wherever you are in the world. So don't forget to subscribe and follow and make sure it's part of your weekly listening. That was Boris Way with Walking Away as we get into the final minutes of this week's hour. And it's been a very property intensive conversation this week. We've had almost an hour of just talking about property on all kinds of levels, but I think it's always fascinating. It's always such an important part of our economy and also, of course, of people's investments. A lot of people going into property. But as we get into our last property conversation for this week, I'm thrilled to be joined by Wikus Lategan. He's the CEO of Calgro M3, and they announced an interesting development known as the Bankenveld District City development. But I've got Wikus on the line, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about this. Wikus, what is this development all about, and what is its significance in relation to Sandton as Africa's richest square mile?
I think this development to us is significant because it brings affordable housing, what we see as affordable, to the periphery, basically the economic hub of South Africa, and most probably the biggest, if not biggest or second biggest in Africa, if you look at Sandton versus Nigeria. So if you look at statistics around the world, and I'm going to use London as an example, just not to use South Africa. But if you're in London city centre, the workers' class have to travel quite far and long hours during the day to get to their job opportunities. If you compare that to South Africa, you've got very, very similar scenarios where it's estimated that the lower LSM groups effectively spend up to 1/3 of their consumable income on transport to work and back. That doesn't even take into account the time it takes. And the problem with time is the time you can never get back. So if you go and stand on the corner of informal settlement, let's take Johannesburg, Honeydew, Diepsloot, in the morning, Tembisa, Midrand, and you see how many people are leaving for formal job opportunities at 4:55 a.m. in the morning with their kids because they first have to drop off their kids at school. That's not the life. And they travel for an hour and a half, 2 hours. They're much more affected by load shedding than what we are all affected because we try and travel outside of load shedding times when the robots are working, where these people can't. They have to be at the job at a certain time. They knock off at a certain time, and they don't have proper family values because they don't spend enough time with the kids. They can't work harder, improve themselves in their job, uplift themselves, get a better job because they can't spend more time to work because they spend 3-4 hours a day in traffic. And that's what this development, Bankenveld District City, is supposed to do. It's supposed to bring affordable housing closer to the economic hub, closer to where job opportunities, closer where people live, play, to also firstly save their money in terms of transport costs, and secondly save all that time, which is socially, I believe, very, very important in South Africa.
Yeah, look, I mean, I like to argue that it is a partly, or at least half of it, a public transport issue, that public transport is just not cost effective enough in South Africa. But I also take the point that it's also proximity to work that probably also plays a huge factor in it, and also helps people be part of the economy if they're closer to where they need to work. This new development that you're doing together with the Eris Property Group, I mean, you're looking at delivering about 20 to 30,000 housing units alongside retail, alongside industrial spaces, commercial spaces. For those people not familiar with the exact geographical location of this development, what kind of area are we talking about here?
So this is effectively a property opposite Whitmead. So if you come out to Whitmead Macro, you cross the highway, drive into it, up to the N3. That's basically the property, all that open land. And it's almost a new economic hub we're going to create there. It's between, I saw one of the articles said it's between Waterfall and Sandton. It effectively is between Waterfall and Sandton, because this side of the N3, and we're going to create not only residential, but to your point, lots of industrial, commercial, retail centers, create a new town, almost to say 50,000 housing opportunities equate to 150,000 people residing there. So it's quite a big opportunity.
What are some of the timelines that we're looking at in terms of this coming to completion? I'm assuming this is probably a couple of phases that you're going to have to roll out.
Yeah, so total project roughly 15 years, 10 to 15 years. It's a long project. From a residential perspective, we're not going to walk away from all our other developments. We've got equal size in other developments, and we have to make sure that we also spread our risk from an investment perspective into Calgro, and the same with Eris. They have to keep focusing on all the other investments as well. But from a timeline perspective, we have our town planning in place. We've got our environmental approval in place. We hope to break ground on this, what I call bulk and link infrastructure, so major roads, stormwater, water infrastructure, connecting that towards October, November this year. We're waiting final approvals on that, otherwise January next year. That front runs most probably the top structure of any of residential or industrial commercial of roughly 12 miles. So that means that towards the end of next year, top structures should commence, and then the first housing units handed over effectively end of 2026. So quite a long runway up into it. And again, to your earlier comment, we're trying to plan this better from a global perspective. When a lot of projects, you look at the phasing and you only plan the first phase, you only install infrastructure for the first phase. And then when you get to phase 5, you say, but hang on, we should have actually in phase 1 done ABC because of the structure of the project. We're trying to plan everything at once, and then we'll start rolling out in a phased approach, and we hope to get it right.
Well, I do hope you get it right, and it is a massive project that's underway. But if you do see things starting to happen in that area, you now know what's happening and how it's happening. Wikus, Lategan, CEO of Calgro M3, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Sandton Times Hour, and I wish you all the best for this new development called Bankenveld District City.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, I think that's all we have time for this week as I look at the clock, and the Sandton Times Hour comes to an end right now on Mix 93.8, and is always available on all the other podcast platforms that we mention every single week. I'm going to mention them all again now because, time runneth incredibly quicketh. So if you want to get in touch, you can email edit@sandtontimes.co.za and connect on social media @Sandton Times, and hop onto the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. It's always good to hear from you, so make sure you send through those messages and those questions and comments. Thank you to all my guests who made the time to be on the show this week, as well as Vincenzo. Thank you for holding the fort as I am in and out of town. And thank you to the Sandton Times team, as well as everyone at Mix 93.8. Let's wrap up the show this week, and let's keep it upbeat and play out with Outcast and Hey Ya. Thank you for listening, and let's do it again next week.